Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. I'm
Good
still letting some
morning.
people in from the lobby. Go. We'll get started in a few minutes. Well, since we only have 30 minutes, we're going to get going, and I will monitor our lobby and keep allowing others in. But I just want to say good morning to everyone. Thank you again for joining us. I am Chris Krahansel, and I have the privilege to oversee all the business development and the client engagement here at Biologics Consulting. We are so thrilled that you could join us. As I mentioned earlier, our topic for today is IND review timelines from a former FDA reviewer's perspective. And so there will be some time at the end of today's presentation for Q&A, so please hold off if you can. And we also strongly encourage you to reach out to our presenters today if you have additional questions after our time is over. Here at Biologics, we are all about helping companies help them with whatever we can do to support their needs. But the bottom line for us is we do what we do for the good of public health. And so thank you again for joining us. And so without further delay, I want to introduce our presenters, Emily Place and Bruce Pierce. Emily, why don't you start off?
I'm Emily. I've been at Biologics Consulting for just over a year, I guess a year and a summer, half a summer. And I came here from the FDA in the Office of Oncology Products. I was there for 8 years as a primary reviewer in non-clinical, and 4 years in benign heme and heme malignancies, and 4 years in one of the solid tumor divisions, reviewing all kinds of interesting molecules, from small molecules to biologics, oligos. I have an expertise in oligonucleotide therapeutics, and hundreds and hundreds of IND applications, and had my nose in probably close to 100 different marketing applications if you count 505(b)(2)s and other things. So I have a lot of experience, and especially in the INDs. At last couple of years, just at IND every other 2 weeks. So I'm happy to share my experience with you today, and really excited to talk shop with my colleague, Bruce. Bruce?
Yeah, thank you, Emily. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bruce Pierce. I'm a senior consultant at Biologics Consulting, and I've been with them since 2010. I came to Biologics because when I was in the biotech industry, I actually hired Biologics to help with a BLA that we were working on. I have over 30 years experience when I made my transition from being a professor at Boston University, torturing medical students in pharmacology, where I earned the moniker pharmacologist from hell. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask Emily, what does a 30-day IND review timeline look like from the point of view of an FDA reviewer?
That's a very good question. Because I think a lot of people don't really understand how little time a primary reviewer actually has with an application. So I shared a slide. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
If you can't, give me a thumbs up.
I can.
Okay, good. All right, so I put the month of April up here as an example, just from this past year. And if you see the little green circle from March 31st, that would be a submission for an IND. And keep in mind that we have a 30-day calendar deadline for an IND. So once you submit an IND, you have 30 days review period. So let's say you submit it on the 31st of March. then your 30-day deadline would fall on the 30th of April. However, since the 30th of April is a Sunday, that means your 30-day deadline defaults to a business day, which is a Friday, the 28th. So your IND review period is already cut short 2 days. Now, one of the most important pieces of the review cycle, if not the most important, is the safety meeting. And that's that big star on the calendar there on April 20th. And typically the safety meetings are a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday, because a lot of times the Mondays and Fridays can be tough with holidays. So one of the things you can try to figure out if you're trying to submit your IND is, when is the safety meeting going to be? Now, when you are trying to communicate with the agency at the very end of your IND submission, you have a period of time which you'll go back and forth on information requests, or maybe you won't, maybe everything will be perfect, but you have to account that there's going to be at least that time right before that deadline, which in this example is on the 28th, where you'll have maybe some information requests going back and forth. Maybe you'll be negotiating a start dose or a dose escalation. And so if that deadline is the 28th, you're not going to the safety meeting won't fall on the 25th, 26th, or 27th. It'll be a week before that, because they'll want to have some time to communicate with you any potential information requests. So the safety meeting for this IND would be the 18th, 19th, or 20th. So for this example, I used the 20th. And that's a very important marker, because the safety meeting is determined, and then the entire review process kind of revolves around that. And the safety meeting is when the entire team gets together and meet to discuss. It's an internal meeting, and we meet to discuss an alignment on everything related to the IND. So the dose, the safety monitoring, any kind of chemistry issue, anything that is multidisciplinary that needs alignment. So once that safety meeting is determined, then everything else can move forward from there. Now, like we said before, that IND came in on the 31st. That's when it goes to a regulatory project manager, right? And a regulatory project manager has to then send it off to the supervisors of each of the heads of the multidisciplinary team, right? So it has to go to a team lead or a supervisor to the clinical team. It has to go to a supervisor chemistry, has to go to a supervisor non-clinical, potentially clinical pharmacology. Maybe it goes to another center if there's a consult, CDRH if it's a drug, or and it has a device or a diagnostic. That takes a couple of days. It goes on the 3rd or the 4th. And then those supervisors have to assess their workload. Who's going to get this assignment, right? Who has enough time to handle this assignment right now? So that goes on the 3rd or the 4th. And then, so that's right up here. And now we're thinking, all right, does our reviewer get started on it right away? Well, most likely on the 4th, 5th, or 6th, they're getting ready for their other safety meeting, right? It doesn't start to get really reviewed immediately unless that primary reviewer is just sitting around. That never happens. So they're most likely dealing with another IND or another issue, and they probably won't even look at it until the 7th. That's the likelihood. So typically they start reviewing it later that week, and they have the entire next week to review it, because the safety meeting's on the 20th. Their supervisor's going to want to look at it before the safety meeting, and they're going to want it at least that Friday before the safety meeting, if not Monday or Tuesday, so that they can have a good amount of time to assess if there are any hold issues prior to the safety meeting. The key being any type of hold issue that they may want to make sure is okay to communicate to the sponsor during that information request period. Then they can give it back to the primary viewer with any edits or any communications that they may need to make to the rest of the multidisciplinary team, hopefully before the safety meeting. Because during the safety meetings, it's not just one IND that is discussed. There are multiple INDs across the entire division. You know, could be one or two, it could be 5 or 6. It's an hour and a half long meeting. So you have to be concise and quick when you talk about your application. Everybody's talking during that meeting. There's some chit chat. So you have to be ready for the meeting, and then you go. It's a very quick process. So and then
Emily,
yeah, go
can I
ahead.
interrupt? One of
Sure.
the things that really struck me about this when I first saw it is that the primary reviewers only have 5 days to
That's
review
right.
the IND and put together the summaries and the information for their supervisors to review and assess whether or not there need to be any edits before it goes to the safety meeting and that final decision is made
That's right.
about the IND, right? So this was, we think about this as a 30-day timeline, but in fact, the primary reviewers have 5 days to digest, assess, and summarize everything,
That's right.
which lends a different perspective to this.
That's right. Yeah. And 5 days it's not a lot of time, right? So, as a client, having clients, it's important for us as consultants to to keep the clients oriented that they are the experts, and when you're submitting a package, when you're submitting an IND to the agency, you have to communicate very clearly, very concisely. You have to keep things very clear. You have to make sure you submit section 2. Um, you know, make sure that you have those tabulated summaries done well. Those are the things that help orient supervisor. Make sure that you very clearly write out the start dose and anything that's related to safety monitoring. That really helps, I think, keep everything straight. I mean, those are the things that get people put on hold. Anything that may put you on hold, make sure that that's included in the package. It seems very straightforward, but don't throw a bunch of stuff into the IND that you don't need. Make sure that you have everything that you need up front and clear. I can't emphasize that strongly enough, because you're the expert. You don't want to put a bunch of clinical things in the non-clinical section. You don't want to put a bunch of non-clinical things in the clinical section. Keep things where they're supposed to be. And it makes things much easier for the reviewer, because they, like I said, they only have 5 days. They're not the experts. You're the experts. So show them what they need to know so that they can make that decision in 40 hours that you've been working 5 years on.
I often tell clients that they should tell a very clear story, a clear and consistent story, and make it easy for reviewers. You mentioned the tabulated summaries, and I've been in meetings where multiple consultants are in the meetings with clients, and the other consultants have said, "Well, you don't have to put those tabulated summaries in. You can just have a table in the text of the IND." And you just pointed out that the tabulated summaries are important for the review and the supervisor's review of the IND. So what do you think about shortcuts like that? And how do they impact the reviewer?
Pretty cheap. I don't know. I mean, I know some divisions that they would definitely send off and request for the tabulated summaries. Other divisions, they wouldn't, but they would be fairly annoyed about it. The tabulated summaries are helpful in making decisions about dose, right? Because if you have a toxicity, especially a severe toxicity, and there are animals dying, then you can very quickly see the toxicity curves in the dose range finding studies or in the MTD studies at other doses that you may not be able to see more clearly in the pivotal tox studies. So they're very helpful, the tabulated summaries, and seeing some of that data, especially early deaths in the animal toxicity studies. And if you have toxicity or even histopath, it's very important to include the tabulated summaries. And the supervisors, especially one of my former supervisors, like live and breathe and die on those tabulated summaries. So, and if some of these divisions are very busy, and if you want them to get through your IND reasonably in amount of time, if they can't do a 30-day full safety review, they may be doing a shorter safety review, and the tabulated summaries are going to make that possible. So I would strongly encourage including them to get your IND through in an efficient way to make a good decision.
So what are some of the other things that may contribute to being on clinical hold, and what can consultants and the sponsor do to avoid that?
So I think a few of the main reasons for non-clinical reasons for clinical hold would be lack of GLP certification. That's, I guess, one of the more straightforward reasons. An unsigned path report. And, those are all things that can be just very clearly put up front. You can hyperlink those in the reports. You can make sure that they're very obvious. You can put that even in the tabulated summary, GLP status right there. Maybe an inadequate toxicology package. They're not using the clinical route of administration. There's issues with duration, dosing, the number of species. There's missing studies. The starting dose is not supported by the available tox, data in the tox species. They haven't clearly defined a no AEL. Or there's unmonitorable toxicities. Maybe they did not see it in their data. Maybe they did not see it in their send data, or they weren't able to analyze that. So these are all things that sometimes pop up that the sponsor's not expecting because they, kind of willy-nilly put their application together. And that the FDA is, they have tools to do data analysis pretty quickly, and they can put it together with their multidisciplinary team.
So if you had some general recommendations to our listeners here who are anticipating putting an IND in, other than coming to us to help them to do that successfully, what would those few things be, or primary recommendations that you'd make?
I would say, include module 2. Make sure that you're including all of that because it's important for supervisors. Make sure that you're not being redundant, make information easy to find in the sections that it's supposed to be in, and make sure it's clear information, it's logical. Make sure that you use pre-IND meetings. Those are very helpful. I think a lot of people don't use those, or they don't use them logically. So there's strategies, right? Like, do you want to determine if your tox package is adequate, or do you want to discuss your start dose? So you could have it before or after, you've completed your tox package. There's a strategy for each of those. make sure that you can avoid clinical hold, run the study's GLP, make sure that path report is signed. If you can, review your send data, include a rationale for your start dose. It's very simple to do. Make sure that it flows logically, and we can do all of that, of course. Make sure that you have a clear written tox and pharmacology summary, link to your study reports in there. If you have a Mabel approach, make sure that you include a table, write it all out, link to the study reports. Keep in mind that 30-day deadline, because if everything is clear and written out and nice, that review gets done in not 5 business days, but 3. It's can be done in 2 business days, honestly, especially if it's a antibody, can be done pretty quickly, right? Anticipate any hold issues and perform well-designed studies with safe drugs. What else can we ask for?
Right. So you mentioned the pre-IND meeting. So one of the things that I advise sponsors to do is to try to establish a consensus with FDA with regard to what you're going to include in the IND, and ask any questions. That's the time to ask questions to make sure that you're clear, so that, and the consensus that you establish is one where there won't be any surprises for FDA when the IND comes around.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and try to ask specific questions. Of course, you can ask the generic questions like, does this non-clinical toxicology package appear sufficient for IND? Blah, blah, blah. And you might get a generic response back like, yes, it appears sufficient. However, this will be a review issue. So yeah, I mean, they're not going to review it for you right there, right? They're not going to go through all the details of it, but what they're saying is that it looks like your protocol is okay, and once we get into the nuts and bolts, we'll tell you if there's anything wrong with it. But the
Yeah, you want to
protocol
know
looks
if there's
good.
any potential deficiencies
Right.
beforehand. This is the time to put them on the table and to discuss them with the FDA. And
Right.
if there are issues, what your compromise is to address it and see how FDA responds.
Right.
Bruce and Emily, I'm going to jump in here real quick. We have 5 minutes left, and we have a couple questions that have come through already in the chat.
Right.
So if you have any other questions, please present them. We want to be able to answer as many as we can in 5 minutes, but we'll do the best we can. First one is there a specific time of the year when the FDA receives a higher number of original applications?
Yeah. Right at the holidays when everyone goes on vacation. And the beginning of the year too. Like the end, it seems like at the end of the first quarter, there's always a lot of stuff. But right at the end of the year tends to get really busy. The end of like the third quarter tends to get really busy too. But the end of the year is the worst, like Thanksgiving, and the holidays. December is insane.
Okay, great. Another question is, I am wondering what studies are required to be GLP. Is GLP certification sufficient, or do all studies have to be GLP? Are there any exceptions?
Do you want to answer, Bruce, or I can?
Yeah, the studies that address safety, toxicology studies, those studies that are important to setting the starting dose and the safety margin, these all have to be GLP. You can do dose range finding studies that are tox studies, but ultimately your pivotal tox studies need to be GLP, as well as safety pharmacology. Pharmacology studies in general, which are demonstrating prospective efficacy, don't need to be GLP, but safety pharmacology and toxicology, repeat dose toxicology, absolutely need to be GLP.
And US GLP
US
or
GLP,
FDA
yes,
for the FDA.
yes.
Okay, those are 2 questions we have. If there's any more questions, please type them in. There's another person who wanted to come in. Are there any last comments you'd like to make, Bruce or Emily? We're almost at our end of our time. We have no more questions at the moment, but I'm sure some of our listeners will be writing us, and I hope they will, for some more additional advice and for some support. But
Yeah.
anything else you want to finish with in terms of any advice you want to give?
Yeah, well, actually, I wanted to finish with the fact that one of the reasons that we're doing this is to make people familiar with who we are and what we're doing here. And I would love to have them come by, if not to help them to put together an IND and submit it, which we can do an excellent job to review their IND before they put it in, so that we can catch these things that may trip them up, put them on clinical hold. We love to help anyone out who's interested in that. And I'm sure Emily feels the same way.
Yeah. And to maybe uncover some of the mystery of what goes on at the agency, right? Because we're going to be talking about something else at our next podcast.
Yes.
Great.
Oh.
Our next podcast, right? We have a hand raised here, and let me see if I could unmute. I'm going to allow your mic, Adrian. If you want to present your question, go right ahead.
Adrian, you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Adrian is on mute. Adrian, if you have a question, you can type it in.
Maybe you could type it in,
text.
Adrian, if you.
Yeah. In the chat, is there?
Let's see. No, I can't seem to get the mic to work. Yeah.
Yeah. If you had your hand raised, contact us directly. You can email us.
She typed it in. She typed it in for us.
Great.
How long is your process? Adrian asks.
I'm assuming it means the process for putting together an IND. I think it depends in part on how well prepared a client is. If they come with the reports all completed and organized, and how busy we are, it could take us weeks, or if things are in the process of being developed and studies are underway, it could take a month or 2 to put something together. But generally, if everything is in place, all the studies that are done and everything, we can do this fairly quickly. Probably a couple of weeks to write the body of the IND, and then we have publishing time on top of that. So, but there is lead time because we're busy, and people need to understand that we're squeezing them into the schedule, so to speak. But we do it as quickly as we can, and with certainly a degree of sensitivity of the business objectives of our clients and what their goals are.
Good. Thanks, Bruce. Emily, any comments about that? Any additional thoughts?
No, I mean, we try to work with our clients to see what their timeline is, and it really depends on, what type of molecule it is, right? And how many studies they have. So.
Right. We're past our time, but we have a couple more questions here real quickly. What are the guidelines for LPS? Is the monocyte activation test being used as a surrogate?
That one I don't. If that might be a chemistry question. I'm not sure I can answer that.
Yeah, that might be one for our CMC group, which we could definitely pass along for completing. Yeah. Another one from Carrie says, typically how much information requests received are the questions collated in one request?
Yes. It really depends on the application. Sometimes we don't have, sometimes they don't have any information requests to send along. Sometimes it's 2 or 3. Sometimes chemistry sends their own series of information requests because they can be quite extensive depending on how that's going. So it depends. Usually clinical and non-clinical go in one letter, and chemistry sends their own if chemistry has more than 1 or 2.
Okay, great. Well, if that's all the time we have for today, I just want to say thank you to Emily and Bruce for the wonderful information, and thank you all for joining us. Biologics Consulting is here to support you with anything that's related to FDA regulatory and product development services that you might need. So please reach out to us. And again, you can find Emily and Bruce on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to them through our website. If you have additional questions, they would be happy to respond. Once again, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.